everyone. Monica Bodierski here. How are you doing? Thank you so much for tuning in. Know what I've got here? I have a little drawing that I am going to give Rachel of Wrath, also known as Rachel Schmidt, because she was kind enough after last week's story time of the strange disappearing tomatoes, kind enough to share her own story about her friend Matt, who apparently swiped a black t-shirt and it went missing for quite a while and then reappeared. You know, I really appreciate when people are kind enough to take that amount of time, and if you have a story and you'd like to share it with me, I might just drop you a little drawing, watercolor painting too. This other one I'm working on is from Sarah M.L., who also was nice enough to share a story. This one about her colleague John, who passed away, and about an ironing board that while she was getting ready to go to his funeral, she was a bit hyper and couldn't find what she was looking for. And when she opened the closet, the ironing board flew out. Of course, that was unusual because, well, apparently the ironing board was behind clothing. And even though she put it back, it did that a couple of times, apparently of its own free will. So, I think that happened a couple times, and then Sarah kindly said, "Okay, John, that's enough." Ironing board then stayed where it was. So, like I said, you know, it is really kind of you and very communally minded to share your own tale. So, if you have, I might say drop me a line to my email, which is monica.bodierski@gmail.com. So maybe I will send you your own little piece of art for taking the time whenever I do a story time video, because you know I'll be changing those up. But when I do share one, if you want to share one of your stories, I will give you a drawing. Okay. So listen, what are we talking about today? Well, I'm still working on my new Oracle deck. I've got a few things on the go, you know, vampire fangs in the denture dish, and this kind of spooky looking ear of corn. Now, I know I tend to see a lot of things as spooky. It is the season of shadows, though, and by that I mean there's less and less light. The sun goes down quicker. The sun comes up a little bit later if you are here in the northern hemisphere. And, well, our imaginations can turn to the shadows. We can start to see things that maybe aren't there. And we start to think about perhaps our own shadow work and spirits. Shadow work, of course, being the psychological aspects that we don't really like to face, that coming from Carl Jung. But when we're not looking at those shadows, we're not living our full and authentic and integrated lives. Not really. Sometimes those are just things we don't like, and often those come to us as, well, really distasteful because society says so. So, you know, I often do shadow work this time of year, and part of that is very much inspired by my drawings. You know, there are shadow aspects to everything, even an ear of corn. What could that possibly be? Well, the harvest season, things are dying. We are maybe trying to store food so we can survive the winter, which maybe is not as much of a thing as it was for our ancestry, but I think that kind of carries over to us at times. And also, well, I remember seeing this really, I don't know, creepy movie called Children of the Corn. I don't know if any of you remember that, but it was really weird, like all these weird looking blonde kids who, I don't know, ended up sacrificing people and chasing them through cornfields. Okay, see, no thanks. I like to see where I'm going. I think inherently, because of the height of corn stalks, we feel that we can get lost. We don't know what we're going to encounter. Oh, heck, People have corn mazes around Halloween time. No thanks, I think I'll pass. And, it's not just that we can't see where we're going. The thing with the Children of the Corn and other movies I've seen like that, there's so many sort of like that, is conformity and where we draw the line between what is communal mindedness and what we should share as a community, and what we kind of, when we lose our individuality, we start to have this really weird groupthink that is quite mindless. It becomes just this majority thought without any ability for somebody to have their own thoughts, their own behaviors, or something that might go against the crowd. Now, I know this might be a genuine shadow for many of us who perhaps wonder about fitting in or why we don't fit in. And then we start to think about maybe if we could conform a little bit more, well, maybe we would feel more comfortable, we would be accepted. And yet, when we cross that line, I'm sure some of you have done it, I know I have, you start to lose yourself entirely and you're going, wow, how did I just get absorbed into this kind of live for the weekend group think, attitude? I kind of lost myself in there somewhere. And I think for a lot of us, especially in the pandemic, and knowing that we are going into a whole second fall of the pandemic still being here, very real and very present, the ideas of being an individual and what we need to conform to, or perhaps what some of us will and some of us won't as far as group safety goes with this plague, those questions have really been coming to mind for me. So that's just a little bit about how I think about things when I'm drawing them, and how just remembering a simple thing like a film can put, and the season, of course, because I have an earth-based spirituality, but how that can put me into a space where I would draw what I consider generally creepy corn. Okay, so I think something else that I really wanted to share really quickly with you here was that I made walnut ink. There's lots of walnut trees here thanks to squirrels planting walnuts constantly. And I boiled down about 12, not a lot. So this is a fairly translucent to transparent ink. And I actually do that for a reason, so that it retains the quality of my watercolors, but I can also use this dip pen. I had trouble finding them. Oh my gosh, I tossed my dip pens all over the place, but I dug them out. And they have those little nibs. Sometimes people use them for calligraphy and comic book. Those are different nibs, but these are kind of all-purpose, fine point. They're a little too fine. I'm actually looking forward to trying, well, that one's my calligraphy, nib. But I'm looking forward to trying a glass dip pen, because I think those have a slightly thicker line, and I'd just like to give that a try. So, I use my inks on watercolor paper, which are fairly absorbent, and I think I really like the quality of the line that you get from dip pens. Sometimes, depending on the pressure of this kind of nib, it can get a little thicker and a little thinner, which is great. It gives it a character. Otherwise, completely even technical pens at times to me can feel a little bit flatter. So every kind of a style or tool or material gives you a completely different feel, even if it is subtle at times. To me, it's really apparent. I also really like to paint with these inks. As I said, I leave them transparent, translucent for a reason. And that is so I can use them along with my watercolors. Basically, so I've got a brown colored watercolor. And it does have a bit of honey in it, okay, raw honey, which does give it a slight sheen when it dries, but nothing distracting. It just helps give it a bit of flow and makes it move very smoothly on the paper. You can see the ink that I was using with the nib is a little bit darker, and that's how it dries. It's an interesting thing to work with. I've worked with a lot of different dyes and inks because I was part of the textile department at OCAD University, where we worked a lot with natural dyes, and I did with natural inks as well. So if you want to give that a try, by all means, give it a try. Ink is just a really fun thing. I have commercial inks that I use too, and this is called a Bombay black ink, and this was or is Rachel's sort of postcard art that I'm finishing for, and the t-shirt was black, of course, so I'm using this black ink. And ink on watercolor paper, oh my goodness, it is so luscious. You know, it is such a nice contrast to a pen and ink because that is very controlled. Well, I mean, you can be loose in your line work, but when it comes to water, ink, and paint, you kind of have to work with it and realize that sometimes you have very little control. You can learn brush control and of course water and the amount of pigment, etc., but you still don't want to overwork things. You want to let them do what they do. And that's why I love working with ink so much, as well as watercolor. And of course, you know, I use enchanted and moonlight water. I also use thunder and lightning water. I love to mix my witchcraft with my art. Well, wait a minute, art is witchcraft. And by the way, if you want to preserve your own walnut ink, give it a try. You can use a little clove oil because it is a preservative. Yes, it smells great. And also sprinkle very, very lightly, maybe a magic ingredient or two, herbs or other things. Just don't let any mold grow in there. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for yet another story time. Have yourselves a wonderful day and week. Leave your comments, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.